I think it is clear to believe in the power of ideas.
Fresh thinking to the Manhattan Institute.
Good evening and welcome to the 12th annual presentation of the Manhattan Institute's Social Entrepreneurship Awards. I'm Howard Husick, Vice President for Policy Research at the Institute and Director of our Social Entrepreneurship and Philanthropy Initiative. When the first of these ceremonies was held in 2001, the event was the first held by the Institute in the wake of the terrorist attacks of September 11th of that year. We spoke that evening of the appropriateness of a celebration of American civil society at a time when we had just seen, under conditions of extreme duress, neighbors helping neighbors, ferrying them to safety, and creating the ways to help those who had lost breadwinners. Tonight, we again meet in the aftermath of tragedy. In the wake of Hurricane Sandy, the citizens of this region again acted in a spirit of mutual aid and self-sacrifice. We've seen volunteers emerge to distribute food and clothing in areas ravaged by water, newspapers publishing the storm editions of their competitors, and hospitals taking in the patients of other institutions. There's a spirit and attitude that unifies all of that. It's the American spirit of self-organization, recognizing and responding to social needs and taking the specific steps needed to address them. And that's the same spirit we gather to celebrate here tonight. The awards which we'll present, 4 in the name of Richard Cornell for social entrepreneurs building new organizations, and the William E. Simon Prize for lifetime achievement in social entrepreneurship, all recognize those who have used their own insights about social needs unaddressed and gone on to build effective organizations to do something about them. Those whom we honor this year, as in the previous 10, have all begun with their own idea and found their support from those same well springs of personal charity and private support which animate our response to emergency. After dinner, we'll recognize this year's award winners, but we begin tonight with a new short film about the program, about the idea of social entrepreneurship, and some of those who practice it. Please join us in watching this short film. Thank you. We now turn to the presentation of this year's Social Entrepreneurship Awards. Our 4 Richard C. Cornell Awards for promising younger organizations, and the William E. Simon Prize for lifetime achievement. I should note that the Cornell Awards carry with them a $25,000 grant to the organization, while the Simon Prize, like the MacArthur Award, carries a personal honorarium of $100,000. Several people whose organization's financial support makes that possible are here with us tonight. Peter Simon of the William E. Simon Foundation. Peter. Nick and Pat Odell. Pat is here, of the Odell Family Fund. And Elizabeth Fonseca of the J.M. Kaplan Fund, who, as many of you know, is the widow of Dick Cornell, for whom the Cornell Award is named. I'd also like to recognize 2 members of our award selection committee here tonight. Jim Pearson, president of the William E. Simon Foundation, and Cheryl Keller, my colleague in visiting and evaluating all our award finalists. And now this year's winner. The term elder abuse may be strange and unfamiliar to many here tonight, but it's very much a real problem. The elderly, even the affluent elderly, can be victimized by unscrupulous family members and others who siphon their financial assets or even abuse them physically. It was not in our award winner Daniel Reingold's job description to do something about that problem when he was named director of one of the nation's best nursing care facilities, the Hebrew Home at Riverdale here in the Bronx. But he began to hear stories from his staff. The one about the man with brain damage that left him unable to gauge who he could trust and who he couldn't. And he began to tell strangers details that led them to drain his bank account. Or the 83-year-old woman whose son did the same. Both have been helped, you really might say saved, by the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Center for Elder Abuse Prevention, which Dan Reingold started at the Hebrew Home. It offers short-term crisis care for most of those whose help, and extended care at no cost for many others. It's a safe haven for those referred to it by a network of community groups and emergency rooms. It's worth emphasizing that the Hebrew Home is a place that any son or daughter would be very comfortable placing an aged parent. And Dan Reingold has opened its doors, its counseling staff, and its rehabilitation therapy programs to the poor, abused elderly of the Bronx, Harlem, and Westchester. And he's convinced other top-quality nursing homes around the country, 6 so far, to do the same. Ladies and gentlemen, nominated by Roger Hertog of the Hertog Foundation, Daniel Reingold.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Howard. We are truly honored, flattered, privileged to receive this award. I want to thank the Manhattan Institute, an organization that I have been a proud member of for many years, and which I'm really proud of because of what you do. And I also want to acknowledge Roger Hertog, who has been a great supporter and great friend for this incredible nomination. I'm very humbled to be in the company of such groundbreaking leaders, and heartfelt congratulations to my fellow social entrepreneurs, Brian, Suzanne, Mark, and Michael. I want to acknowledge here also some great friends from the Robin Hood Foundation, Susie Epstein and Kim Smith, whose confidence in the work we do has been such a great lift for all of us, and so I thank you. The Hebrew Home became founded in 1917 as a shelter, and earlier this evening we talked about the hurricane, and I also want to acknowledge our management team that's here tonight, David Weinstein and David Pomerantz and Luz Liebeskind, who over the last 2 weeks, the Hebrew Home has brought in over 140 evacuees from nursing facilities that were destroyed during the storm. And these folks have been working literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the last 2 weeks, literally saving lives of people. So I want to acknowledge the work that you've been doing. And I want to acknowledge my wife, Abby, who keeps the home fires burning and allows me to work as hard as I do and to go out and to do these kinds of things. Abby, thank you for our beautiful 3 daughters and for the work that you do to keep me out and busy. So thank you. This honor is especially meaningful because it recognizes the life-saving work of the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Center for Elder Abuse Prevention at the Hebrew Home. And I share this honor with the managing director and managing attorney and director of the Weinberg Center, Joy Solomon, who's here this evening. Joy, thank you. And as well, our assistant director and general counsel, Deirdre Locke, who every day, Joy and Deirdre do the hard work that is involved in rescuing victims of elder abuse. Yes, thank you. I want to be brief, and Howard really covered a lot of the material. But what I do want to tell you is that in New York State and around the country, 1 in 24 people, elderly people, are abused. For every case that's reported in elder abuse, 24 go unreported. And I want to just very briefly tell you about a woman named Irene who lived on the Lower East Side in a 1-bedroom apartment, a teacher, retired, with a pension and Social Security, and her son Jimmy showed up one day out of work, thrown out by his wife because he was alcoholic, and he moved in with her, and after a while, instead of sleeping on the couch, he took over her bed. And as soon after that, he began to take her down to the cash machine down at the ATM and started asking her to take cash out, which she did. And he then began to take her mailbox key and take her Social Security checks. Eventually, he began to demand that they go see the lawyer to change the will, and the lawyer, looking at Jimmy as a wonderful son, sat with him and Irene to change the will and leave more of the money to Jimmy. Later, he decided that it would be better if she didn't go out as much, because that way he could control her better. So he took her dentures. And one of the things that you find with older adults is that when they don't have their dentures, they don't go out. And so she stayed home without her dentures. And he began to taunt her and ridicule her and call her stupid and frail and old. And she began to lose sleep and become anxious. And she began to wonder, when did she become so old and stupid and frail? And as her health began to deteriorate, she was an independent woman who, over the course of 4 weeks, became a frail and sick and anxious and scared older adult. And one day, when the Yankees were losing while he was watching TV, Jimmy took his cane and swung it and hit a lamp and broke the glass, and his mother, Irene, cut herself. And he called 911, and when the EMTs showed up, they didn't ask any questions about what happened, and they bandaged her up, and away they went. And this kind of behavior went on. She went to a teller one day with Jimmy, and Jimmy grabbed her arms real tight and said, take out some cash. And the tellers never said a word. They just gave her the money, never asked any questions. Since the Weinberg Center opened at the Hebrew Home in 2005, I just want to make a point. 90 days from independence and freedom and dignity, Irene declined and became frail and ashamed and anxious. Since the Weinberg Center opened at the Hebrew Home in 2005, we have provided over 30,000 days of shelter for victims of elder abuse. Our model has been replicated in 6 long-term care facilities around the country, and yesterday one in Baltimore and one in Wilmington, Delaware, also agreed to replicate this model. The team has trained, our Weinberg team, has trained over 30,000 people in New York City and around the country. Doctors, police, firefighters, nursing students, lawyers, Meals on Wheels delivery people, probation officers, judges, military personnel, teachers, clergy, and in New York City, the one group of people that know what's going on behind those closed doors, the doormen. In a unique partnership with Local 32 BJ of New York City, we're training those doormen to recognize what's going on in the apartment buildings. Yet elder abuse remains hidden, unknown to so many in our community, unnoticed, unreported, and unfunded. I met Irene almost a year after Jimmy moved in and took over her life, her home and her fear and her assets. Suffering from a broken hip, an astute hospital social worker working on a discharge plan used a screening tool designed by the Weinberg team. It assessed her older adult safety and elder abuse potential. It was there, in a private and calm moment of direct and thoughtful care, that the social worker finally chipped away to uncover the brutal truth that had been hiding there in front of the bank teller, the clergy, and all the people that Irene had encountered throughout these weeks of terror. At the Weinberg Center, Irene received rehabilitation for her hip, a family court order of protection against her son, an order of eviction, because we can use the civil legal services, unlike the criminal services, which are harder to prove in an elder abuse case. We did that through a telephone arrangement through the Weinberg-sponsored Order of Protection Project, an order protection project which we've done with the court system in New York City. A newly drafted will was created, a financial counselor was retained to undo what Jimmy had done, and she decided not to pursue criminal charges, which is typical in these cases. We live with the harsh reality that there are many more Irenes living in our city and in our country. In her honor, I thank you all for this award and for this recognition. Thank you.
The doorman, that is the greatest. Having personal identification is something that most of us take for granted. But imagine for a moment living without it. How would we open bank accounts, get employment, or God knows, board an airplane? There are thousands, the formerly homeless, the formerly incarcerated, those struggling with mental health or substance abuse problems, those who lose their homes to floods and hurricanes, who lack basic identification, and when they seek to obtain it, encounter a bewildering maze of public agencies through which even a good lawyer would have difficulty navigating. Enter our second award winner, Michael Dippy, to organize private volunteers to make government work. The result is called iDignity, and since 2008, it's created the means for 12,000 Orlando, Florida area residents to obtain government-issued identification. Michael has done it by bringing government, departments of health, motor vehicles, the Social Security Administration, among others, to the people, assembling all the right agencies each month. There's a clear, non-bureaucratic goal here to help those without ID become full participants in society. There are also some poignant personal goals, such as the one about the man who asked for identification so that he might not be buried as a John Doe. Not long after he was indeed found dead on the streets of Miami, his iDignity identification card made it possible for him to be laid to rest in Chicago amongst his family members. Ladies and gentlemen, the man who helped make that and much more possible for thousands who are still alive, nominated by Mayor Buddy Dyer of Orlando, Florida, Michael Dippy.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank the Manhattan Institute for this inspirational award and this opportunity to share the good works that iDignity has done. It is a unique nonprofit social enterprise that assists the poor and disadvantaged in obtaining their crucial identification documents. And it's funny, the story you mentioned reflects another story that a volunteer told me that was helping out another homeless person in downtown Orlando just a few weeks ago. And didn't have anything to do with iDignity, but the guy shared the same story. Just an amazing, amazing story about how he did not want to die as a John Doe. And this guy had taken it one step further and had gotten his name and his social security number tattooed on his side of his body, just to make sure. Probably something we never have to think about, thank God. It's a huge honor to stand here before you tonight representing iDignity, and yet it's important to understand that I do not stand here alone. I stand here on behalf of the over 12,000 clients that iDignity has served. I stand here on behalf of the thousands of volunteers and government agents that have served at the iDignity events. I stand here on behalf of the numerous mentors and investors that have encouraged, supported, and guided me on this very difficult journey. I stand here to publicly thank God for making this all possible. I began my journey working with the poor when a visiting pastor challenged my congregation to find something in society that bothers you, some unmet need, some social injustice, and then dedicate your life to solving it, to address that need. For me, it was the plight of the homeless and the disadvantaged that I witnessed in Orlando, Florida, often referred to as the happiest place on earth. This led me to start a group in 2007 now known as iDignity, primarily represented by the downtown Orlando faith community that was dedicated to addressing the systemic and foundational issue of obtaining legal identification for our neighbors in need. There simply was no place to refer these individuals for adequate help, and the process was far too difficult to handle alone. The problem is that obtaining legal identification must be inherently difficult in order to sustain the integrity of the identity that these documents represent. Yet the same criteria makes it an insurmountable barrier for the poor and disadvantaged, not simply because of the financial barrier with the cost of obtaining identification more than tripling in the state of Florida over the last several years. The primary barrier is due to the complexity of navigating the bureaucracy of securing all the background documents required to obtain a state ID card or a driver's license. It's also a fact that once your ID expires or is lost, it can often become legally impossible for you to secure them again without representation of an attorney, because you can no longer prove who you are, and thus you cannot apply for the background documents that are necessary for a state ID card or a driver's license. There is this unfortunate gap that exists between government and society regarding obtaining government identification, as there is no government agency that can assist individuals in rebuilding their identity. To order their out-of-state birth certificates, their immigration documents, their school records, their medical records, so that they can apply for these state ID cards or these driver's licenses. Simply put, iDignity was developed to bridge this otherwise insurmountable gap for our neighbors in need. While we all know that it is better to teach one to fish than to give one a fish, that person will still need a fishing license. I made that one up myself. Legal identification is the required license to fully participate as a citizen in our modern society, and iDignity's mission is to ensure that legal identification is accessible to all U.S. citizens. Identification is often required to access education, employment, benefits, health care, housing, voting, banking, and numerous other basic human needs. iDignity compassionately and diligently and efficiently assist our less fortunate neighbors in obtaining proof of their identity at no cost to our clients. Although each client's situation is very unique, and let me emphasize very, it takes on average 3 hours of volunteer time and $100 to assist clients in obtaining all their various forms of crucial legal identification documents, thus enabling them to prove they are who they say they are. I want to share with you real quickly a story about just a wonderful man. This gentleman's name is Axel. And Axel was a client this year of iDignity, and he came from Cuba when he was 4 years old, so he is an immigrant. And Axel was down in Miami for most of his life and was part of a band, wasn't actually in the band, but worked with a band called Menudo. Imagine a lot of you have probably heard of Menudo. And he also owned a very good large-scale nightclub in Miami for a while, but he moved to Orlando, and when he was living in Orlando, had a condo, had a job at one of our major restaurants in Orlando, and everything was looking pretty good for him. Until one day he was held up by gunpoint while going to the 7-Eleven. And he told the story about how when you have a gun pointed to your head, you think of nothing else than how to get this gun not pointed at my head. Do whatever they say. This person asked for his wallet. Axel gave him his wallet. No problem, no big deal. Get this gun out of my head, and thankfully he did. And so Axel went home on that Saturday night, still a little bit shaken up, but realizing all I lost was my wallet. I can go Monday morning, get that wallet replaced, go buy a new one, go get a new ID, and go, whoops, that wallet had my immigration documents, and that's going to be tough. So anyway, Axel wakes up Monday morning and starts the journey on his own, and wasn't too far after that he realized that this is not something that he's going to be able to do. And then it wasn't far after that the corporation that he worked for, federal requirement that if you are an immigrant, they have to see your immigration documents every year, and his time came up, and he didn't have them anymore, so he lost that job. Went down to the DMV to try to get his ID. They said, we're going to need your immigration documents as well, plus we need your Social Security card, and we need 2 proofs of where you live. Didn't have any of that. And so he went down to the Social Security office to get that Social Security card so he could get his driver's license. And Social Security said, you don't have any ID and you're an immigrant. We're going to freeze your records. And they red flagged his records, which froze his bank account. So now he has no access to his bank accounts either. So he lost his job, lost his bank account. Now he lost his condo. And now he's living homeless in Orlando. Literally, for 5 months, he lived at Orlando International Airport pretending like he was traveling. It's a great airport, though, and it really is a nice airport. But during the day, he would go and he would try to figure out how to solve this problem. And finally, he just gave up, and he went down to City Hall, and he said, I'm not leaving till you all help me. I got robbed here in Orlando. And thankfully, City Hall works very closely with iDignity. They gave me a call. He came down to iDignity that very day, ran literally because we were shutting down. And we were able to get him a temporary ID within a week. And about 3 months later, we got his immigration documents restored. He's now fully employed. He's even part owner of a local restaurant once again, and living in a downtown apartment, and he made food for our last event for our 100-something iDignity volunteers. So for Axel, amazing to see the stories of someone going from upper middle class to homelessness and back, and to see that iDignity played some small role in that. Since 2008, iDignity has helped more than 3,000 individuals annually by bringing together all these necessary government agencies, attorneys, and volunteers for monthly events in Central Florida to greatly simplify the often difficult process of obtaining identification. We've held over 60 events in Orlando, Florida, and have also launched self-sustaining satellite programs in 3 surrounding counties. iDignity has been blessed to find a viable solution to an incredibly difficult problem. We have been blessed to become a ministry of 7 different denominations. We have been blessed to have every level of government working closely with us to address this one issue. We have been blessed, and as such, we feel compelled to share this blessing with the numerous communities that are contacting me and saying, Michael, how are you doing this? We have the same problem. Will you please help us? Thus, iDignity has launched the 3 previously mentioned self-sustaining satellite pilot programs to prove that this model is replicable and that other communities would provide the essential leadership and financial support for success. For me, it is one of the most rewarding aspects of iDignity to see the impact that our model is having in other communities in need. And the need is huge. The most recent credible study estimates that 11% of adult American citizens do not have valid government-issued identification. That is about 25 million of our fellow adult U.S. citizens, 12,000 less thanks to iDignity. Yay! It is an exciting time for iDignity as we expand our model to other communities that are requesting our help. I thank you again for this opportunity to share our mission with you and hope that you will join in restoring dignity and hope by providing identification. Thanks, Michael.
It was 1966 when the singer James Brown released a song, Don't Be a Dropout. In the decades since, even as the economic reasons to complete high school have become more and more compelling, the dropout problem has continued, especially among those of low income, some 40% of whom leave high school without a diploma. Suzanne McKechnie Klahr could have done many things when she graduated from Stanford Law School, but she chose to do something about the high school dropout problem. Her insight that many low-income students couldn't wait to increase their earnings. That guided her approach in the organization she founded called BUILD, In Business to Learn. Why not use part of the school day and after school to teach disengaged, at-risk students to start their own small businesses? And bring them to BUILD headquarters after school to help with their business plans and, by the way, their homework. Today, BUILD can be found in 18 high schools in 7 school districts from Redwood City, California to Boston, Mass., helping 900 students learn about, yes, American free enterprise and about the importance of staying in school. Last year, 3/4 of BUILD's 12th graders were admitted to 4-year colleges. One of those was a young man I met at Redwood City. It was through BUILD that Daniel Gallegos, first-generation American, met a staff member who'd served in the Air Force. She told him about ROTC scholarships, led him to get one, 4-year free ride at New Jersey's Rider College, where he's attending now, first in his family to attend college. He was to be with us here tonight, but I received this email from him yesterday. I'm very thankful that you thought of me, but I have an exam at 7:30 in the morning on Thursday, and I'm concerned I won't make it back in time. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman who helped Daniel Gallegos know the importance of putting first things first, a native New Yorker nominated by Tara Evans of the Franklin and Katherine Johnson Foundation, Suzanne McKechnie Klahr.
Good evening. No, I'm used to boisterous teenagers. Good evening. Yay! This is such an honor. I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you to the Manhattan Institute. It's been so great to meet the co-honorees and such an honor to be with you. Howard had spoken to me about 10 years ago when I had just started Build and thought it was an interesting concept. And so it's good to know that persistence pays off and that I'm here tonight with all of you because I think the idea has grown and evolved over time. I grew up in this city. I live in the Bay Area now in California, but I grew up in this exceptional, extraordinary, and very resilient city. Like many New Yorkers, I grew up with tremendous blessings and the blessing of exposure to affluence and poverty and different religions and different beliefs, and also millions and millions of dreams. My father, who I'm so thrilled to have with me tonight, is an immigrant and came here with nothing, and he is the American success story, and he has lived the American dream. But somewhere along the way, we have lost our way. We have forgotten about the potential in all young people. We have forgotten that all young people deserve a great education, whether they just came here or whether their families have been here for many generations. And I see it every day in my work at Build. I see it as I speak to colleagues and friends, and I think about 7,200 young people that drop out of high school every single day. 7,200 of kids, and the majority of those kids drop out in 9th grade. So if you drop out in 9th grade, you are destined for a lifetime of poverty and struggle. And what does that look like, 7,200 kids a day? Every week, we can fill Yankee Stadium with high school dropouts. Every week, all year long. And what does it cost? And why should we care? If you just look at the students in the class of 2011 who dropped out, if they had stayed in school, their earnings would have been more than $154 billion. Just their lifetime earnings. That has nothing to do with the cost of society when a young person drops out of school in 9th grade. And if you engage in literature and you look at what's happening educationally in our nation, you see the reason that young people drop out of school, 85% of the young people who drop out say the reason is because they're bored. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And they haven't seen a lot of success. And they might not have had the mentor or the friend or the family member or the teacher who believed in them. So they don't think they belong. When I look around this room, I've met incredible people and I see incredible people, and I think if most of us look back, we had one person or maybe more who really believed in us and told us about our potential. Not all young people have that. So we believe in kids' potential, kids that many others would write off. That's what we do. And we are that champion and that belief structure and that person who will stay with the kids. I founded Build in 1999 with the belief that the students that many others don't believe in have tremendous potential. We work with students who are not just disadvantaged, which is typically low-income kids of color, but highly disengaged, meaning if you look in their middle school record, they were highly truant, terrible grades, low test scores. And what we have found is that through entrepreneurship, we can engage these students. And we teach them how to start small businesses, real businesses. We're right now incubating over 200 youth businesses in this country. Incredible ideas that our high school students start. But it's more than just teaching them about how to start a business. Through the business process, we can embed all the academic competencies young people need to be successful. And even more than academics, it's the life skills. It's knowing how to be professional in interview. It's knowing about how to have a bank account. It's knowing all of these softer skills, the importance of an internship that my children, many of your children will learn at home, but not all kids get at home. So we enter low-performing schools. We're a very high-touch four-year program, dealing with a major problem, but a four-year program. And we enter schools and we ask for the toughest of the tough kids. We don't skim. We go and ask for the students who are at high likelihood of dropping out, and we teach them how to start a business. And we make a promise to them that every young person who stays in our program will, one, start a business and make some money, and two, they will go to college. Now, as you can imagine, the college part is not compelling in the beginning to many of our students, but the making money is. So the kids stick with us, and we keep our promise. Right now, when we look at our last almost 14 years, 99% of the students who have gone through Build that maybe no one else believed in, who were on track to drop out, have graduated high school. 95% have gone to college. Thank you. But we know it's not just about getting to college, it's about persisting. Nationally, 63% of young people who start college get through their first year. For our class of 2011, we just assessed, and the kids going to sophomore year, 93% are still in college. Kids like Daniel, who are studying for their finals tonight. So what's next for Build? We have a very audacious and yet feasible vision. By 2030, we are going to bring entrepreneurial education to every student in the United States because we have learned that the academic skills and the life skills are what is required. Everyone talks about the achievement gap and the dropout crisis, but we also have a skills gap. So even if you get through high school, you're not prepared for the world of work. And we've laid out a 17-year feasibility study and implementation plan. It will include 10 new sites, and hopefully with the support of folks here, New York will be next, if there's appetite. And we're just very excited about growing the program and then advocating for adoption of different standards. Math standards and reading standards are critically important, but if kids are dropping out of school, core standards don't matter. And if kids are no longer engaged, it's not possible to get kids not just through high school, but to careers. So I'm inspired to be here. I thank all of you so very much for the support. I thank the Manhattan Institute. This is a real testament to the work that my incredible colleagues, people like Chris and Stacy and the unbelievable people I get to work with every day have done. And I just appreciate the belief that you have in our students. And you know that they don't need to become just faceless statistics, and they don't have to be high school dropouts. They will be our nation's leaders in a matter of years, and we will be there cheering them on, thanks to people like you who believe in them. Thank you for this honor.
Don't forget that. When New Yorkers retire, we may head to the east end of Long Island, to Fire Island, but not many decide to spend their days at Rikers Island. But when he was through with his career in the cosmetics industry, that's what Mark Goldsmith, our next award winner, decided to do. At Rikers, he was exposed to the young inmates of that vast city jail complex, home to some 15,000 people between the ages of 16 and 21. When he volunteered at its high school, Mark found a mission, helping those, once they get out, to stay out. The scale of what's called the re-entry problem in this country is significant. More than 700,000 prison inmates will be released this year in the United States, and nearly half of those wind up back behind bars. The organization Mark Goldsmith started to do something about that stands apart. It works with inmates when they're behind bars, and it continues with them once they've been released. He first met with former inmates at the Starbucks near his home. Now they come to the Harlem office of Getting Out and Staying Out, where they work with the staff to focus on what it takes to stay out, the personal habits, self-discipline, and clear goals needed to help former inmates complete school, to find and keep a job. The focus is on detail, having a calendar, having a resume. No one forces those who Mark and other volunteers meet with at Rikers to come to his Harlem office after they're released, but more than half of them do so voluntarily. The total to date, more than 1,700, and in the year past, 91% of those assisted succeeded in staying out. Two of those who have stayed out are with us tonight at Mark's table. Sunil Alston, incarcerated at 17, released from Rikers at 18, and with help from GOSO, accepted to the New York City College of Technology while working part-time in maintenance for West Harlem Group Associates, and now applying to go on to four-year colleges. Sunil Alston. Where is he? Where is he? There he is. There he is. Philip White, incarcerated at age 17, came to GOSO at age 22 after a stretch upstate, where another inmate told him about getting out and staying out. Today, he is about to graduate from Hostas Community College in the Bronx and has been accepted to Baruch Business School for the spring semester. Where he will also be an intern for the Sony Corporation of America. Philip White, please stand up again, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, the founder of Getting Out and Staying Out, nominated by John Krieger of the Achilles and Bodman Foundations, Mark Goldsmith.
Thank you, Howard. We are really proud to win the Manhattan Institute Award, and I'm really proud, my fellow winners. I'm impressed. I'd like to share a few facts with you. The United States is 5% of the world's population, 5%. We incarcerate 25% of the people who are locked up in this world. A cost of human capital that has devastated the lives of young men in the inner cities. One of the biggest causes, recidivism. Rikers Island, recidivism rate, over 60% for young men 16 to 24 years of age. This is the information that was given to me when we started 8 years ago. Our goal was to reduce the recidivism rate by 1/3. We thought that would be pretty good if we could get it down to 40%. We've been able to reduce it to 2/3. So against the island rate of 60%, my team has been consistently under 15. Now, volunteerism, the United States, Howard, you're 100% right. There is no country like the United States. I won something called the Purpose Prize a few years ago, and I was flown over to Hamburg, Germany, to talk to the German population there, who all go to pasture. That's it. They retire, they take their retirement funds, and off they go. There is no country like the United States that volunteers and puts money where their heart is and really steps out. And one of the things that, more important than anything else, I think, for retired people, it's very important. Young people need us, no question about it. I started with something called Principal for the Day. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a great program in New York City where people like all of us go into the New York City school systems one day a year, and you bond with the teachers, the students, and the principals. The idea is that society really does care about public education. Now, you know, I'm a product of it. I'm sure most of you are a product of it. And we do have a very interesting and I think a very good school system here. When I registered for the program, I'm a bit of a wise guy, I asked for a tough school. I thought I was heading to East New York, maybe South Bronx. They asked me if I would go to jail, and I said, well, that would be different. So off to Rikers Island I went. On the very first day, at the end of the day, the correction officers came up to me and we said, Mr. Goldsmith, we don't know why they're listening to a white guy in a suit, but they are. What are you telling them? Well, I wanted to make it interesting. So I created an analogy between General Motors and a drug cartel. On the board, I put General Motors, the chairman of the board, and staff the whole organization. And then I said, guys, I don't know how to do a drug cartel, so you tell me. So obviously the kingpin was the chairman of the board, and they staffed the whole thing. And I said, okay, now let's talk about what you're good at. Well, we're not good at anything. I said, you've got to be good at something. Well, actually, I'm good with people. We put them in HR. I'm good with sales, we put them in the sales department. I'm good in finance, we put them in the finance department. And slowly but surely, they each had a position in General Motors. And I said, guys, that's what it's all about. There are jobs out there to take advantage of your skills. And you're much better than you realize. One thing we find out when we go there is the intelligence is incredible. It's just never been challenged. They've been dealt a very bad deck. So after the day, I went back to work, and 1 year later I go back, and they say, well, Miss Ortiz wants you back at Rikers Island. They loved you at Rikers, so back I went. This time a lawyer showed up, and I put my branding hat on from my cosmetic days, and I said, wait a minute, you're talking about them getting out of here, and I'm talking about them staying out of here. So, assisted by my mentor, my wife, Arlene, who's been running a foster care agency in New York City for over 30 years, very successfully, I found out what 501c3s were. And we got organized. Starbucks was my home for over a year. Drank more cafe lattes than you can possibly imagine. And eventually, I mentioned the name of the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation, and also the name of Susie Epstein, who told me about the Weinberg Foundation. And I called them. Arlene and I were actually on vacation in Berlin, and I got an email from Don Weinberg, says, we're giving you $50,000 to open an office. So that's how we got started in East Harlem. What makes us different? What makes us different is that waiting, as Howard said, until the young men get out is absurd. There is time. They're sitting there. Not much is going on. So we start working with them the minute they get incarcerated. Some of my mentors are here tonight, who I'll introduce later. These men go out to Rikers Island, spend countless hours with them. I have a gentleman on my board of directors who unfortunately got involved in some white-collar crime a few years ago, saw the article in the Wall Street Journal, called me up and said, Mark, I want to help. I'm not allowed back in a correctional institution yet. Sure enough, 6 months later, he was back, came to Rikers Island for a full year, and mentored young men. Some people call it mentoring. We call it coaching. What's different about these young men is they have never had an opportunity to speak with another successful person in their entire life. They are surrounded from early in life by unsuccessful people who are not making a difference. They share two things. They really do not have a clear vision of how to achieve their goals. They have hopes and dreams, but how do you get there? But the worst thing of all is they don't know a single person who can help them when they get out. Think about not having a single person that you could call when you get out. That's where GOSO comes in. We meet them on a consistent basis in Rikers, and we're there for them when they get out. There for them in every way possible. But make no mistake about it, they do the heavy lifting, not me, and not my cohorts. Those of us who are mentors and coaches or older, we've done our work. What we're there for is to facilitate. We are not enablers. Every one of these guys steps up and does it all on their own. Philip himself had an interesting situation. He wanted desperately to be an intern at the Sony Corporation. So he went down to Baruch and talked to him about it, and they said, well, Baruch doesn't give credit, college credit. And Sony was saying, well, we don't give internships. I talked to him. We spent a couple hours together, and I said, Philip, you got to go back down there, and you got to fight with these people. You got to tell them that, and then I talked to Howard, whose own son had the same problem, and then Howard told me, we'll talk about... True, but it was transcript recognition, it was called. So Howard's son was able to go back and say he was going to get transcript recognition. These are the kind of obstacles that they run into. Many of the guys are also assigned mentors. One of our mentors is here tonight, the chair of our mentoring program. But what's the focus? I don't have to tell you all. It's education. It's like the three things. It's about real estate. Location, location, location. This is education, education, and more education. And then, of course, jobs that lead to careers. They see career managers. We call them career managers, not social workers or case managers, career managers. They attend seminars, interview skills. They have to go through my office to graduate. And let me tell you, getting through my office is not easy. You've got to perform, you've got to be in there, and you've got to know how to talk about yourself. One of the top coaches in New York, I think you all probably know these people who are professional coaches. I know actually the chairman of the board of Ford Motor Company. I know his coach. He's on our board, and what he does is coach these guys, and they're getting the same professional help that people are paying a lot of money to use our board member. This is a business concept. I'm a ex-businessman. It's an ROI. It's a return on investment. We invest the time, money, and energy, and the return that we want are college degrees, job procurement that leads to careers. The words are evidence-based results. That's what we do. Top to top is our motto. We're right next to Dennis Walcott. We're right next to Commissioner Doris Shearer, who heads up correction. In the business world, you learn the concept of top to top. You mess around too often in the other echelons of management who are not interested in doing something creative, nothing's going to happen. I've been asked many times, without my business career, could I have made it? Absolutely not. I knew how to raise money. I knew how to manage cash flow, profit and loss statements. I knew how to hire, and I also knew how to upgrade. Simply said, I'd already been an entrepreneur, but that was with a profit organization. Now I've taken those skills and moved them into not-for-profit. What am I most of all? I am a troublemaker. You are looking at one of the biggest troublemakers known to man. If you're going to break the status quo in any situation, you have to be prepared to make trouble. Most people are interested in just maintaining. I've been making trouble from the day I started. Just last week, I ran into a situation where a particular jail was not being served with educational services. I called Dora, I called the commissioner. Well, needless to say, when I got there this week, I was not loved and adored, but you know what? I don't care. That's not the reason I'm there. In the end, this is all about a team. I've been very fortunate. We've brought some of the top talent to our staff. We have a great board of directors. We have a great group of funders. And most importantly, a group of young men who work and appreciate what we have to offer. They take advantage of our services that we continue to offer them. I'd like the people at our table, a couple of them to rise as I introduce them. Please hold your applause and then congratulate them as the GOSO team. Representing our staff, our Associate Executive Director, Paul Gutkowski. Representing our Board of Directors, Mr. Cal Mathis and Richard Block. And most importantly, representing our guys, two young men who you've already met on their way to what we feel is a transformation of their lives. There they are. That's the Getting Out, Staying Out team. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. Howard, we thank you for this award. Thank you. Howard kept reminding me, look what's on the back.
And now, before we turn to the presentation of the Simon Prize, it's my honor to ask to come forward the late Mr. Simon's son, Peter, to talk a bit about his father and why the Simon Foundation has chosen to support the award named for him. Peter Simon.
Thank you, Howard. Good evening. It's an honor to be here tonight and celebrate the William E. Simon Prize for Lifetime Achievement in Social Entrepreneurship. Before Howard introduces this year's winner, Brian Lamb, I'd like to say a few words about the person for whom the prize is named, my dad, William E. Simon. Dad, whom many of you remember from his time as Secretary of the Treasury during Nixon and Ford, was a pioneer. He was our nation's first energy czar, and as we all unfortunately know too well from recent weeks, working to ensure that folks have enough energy for their homes and transportation is no easy feat. And those were fun days back then when he'd come home and my mother would say, I stood in line for 2 hours for gas. And he was in charge. He was among the first in business world to use the leveraged buyout as a cutting-edge investment strategy. And he wrote 2 best-selling books that advanced these kinds of free market ideas that at the time were thought to be rather radical. Dad knew what it meant to take risks, to try new things, and as the saying goes, take the road less traveled. He did it time and again during his own career, and it's why he had such esteem for the idea of social entrepreneurship and for the courage and creativity of individual entrepreneurs who are themselves pioneers in their chosen fields. The purpose of the William E. Simon Prize for Lifetime Achievement in Social Entrepreneurship is to salute the ideals that motivated Dad in his life and work, free enterprise, effective philanthropy, and helping people to help themselves. And I can't imagine a better way than this prize to honor him and carry on his legacy, and I know he would be just loving to be here tonight with us. He also sincerely hoped that this prize would become a hallmark for the power of personal innovation and initiative, motivating others to take risks, create organizations that are truly making a difference. I think we've heard 4 just before I came up here that are doing just that. On behalf of the Simon family, we are honored and privileged that Brian will be the newest recipient of the prize that bears Dad's name, and you join a distinguished group of past winners, and we thank you for doing it. And I want to thank Larry Moan of the Manhattan Institute for partnering with the Simon Foundation. You've done a fantastic job of promoting this prize and organizing it and selecting wonderful recipients that do my family proud. And Howard Usick and his team for their invaluable efforts. Congratulations, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. So established is the institution founded by the winner of this year's Simon Prize, so much a part of American life, that it's really difficult to imagine American politics and civic dialogue without C-SPAN. We take for granted its ongoing transmission of the proceedings of the United States Congress, as well as a wide range of events from press conferences to debates, and perhaps most notably in regard to tonight's award winner, its interview programming. And yet there was a time, 35 years ago, when the Cable Satellite Public Affairs Network, yes, it's an acronym, was just an idea that Brian Lamb had, an idea about making the processes and discussions of democracy accessible to American citizens, an idea that as a social entrepreneur, he set out to sell to investors. C-SPAN may cover the United States government, but in the tradition of the First Amendment, it is not funded by it. I don't imagine it was easy to convince the young cable television industry that it should set aside channels, provide the infrastructure and the ongoing financial support for the public purposes Brian Lamb had in mind. But he must have been convincing. It is one thing, and a good one, to start an effective new organization. It's another, even more difficult thing, to build a universally known and respected not-for-profit American institution from scratch. But that's what Brian Lamb, as C-SPAN founder and chief executive, accomplished. And of course, there was his role as an interviewer, asking the right questions of hundreds of authors on the long-running program Book Notes, whether his guest was Mikhail Gorbachev, Margaret Thatcher, Richard Nixon, or George W. Bush. His manner was, as he himself has put it, Spartan, meant not to call attention to himself, but to illuminate. He continues that approach in the Sunday evening program, Q&A. Brian Lamb was a native of Lafayette, Indiana, graduate of that state's Purdue University. He's a Navy veteran who rose to the rank of lieutenant. He's been a reporter for United Press, staff member of the White House Office of Telecommunications Policy, and in recognition for his work at C-SPAN, he's received numerous honors: the National Press Club's Fourth Estate Award, the Media Institute's Freedom of Speech Award, and, in November 2007, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's an honor to present to him at this time the William E. Simon Prize. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Lamb.
A number of years ago, I was asked to go back to my high school in Lafayette, Indiana for an evening of awards. The reason I'm telling you this story is I feel the same way tonight. I sat there for the presentations and listened to 37 students stand up and introduce their favorite teacher in their life. And the reason was, and I was so impressed because the principal of the school had gone to Lafayette Jefferson High School, and he'd played basketball, and it's one of those Midwestern crazed sports schools. That seemed to be all that mattered when I was there. And the idea that this principal was going to have the 37 top scholars in school at this dinner, and they would introduce their favorite teacher. And by the time that was over, I was toast. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the room that night. There were some of the greatest stories I've ever heard, and it's the same way I feel about tonight. Why do I have to stand here after the four of you have been presenting these awards? Great personal stories, and I don't fit into that category. Mine is a strange one. Larry asked me a couple of years ago if I would do this, and I said, frankly, I shouldn't do it, because at the time I was the CEO of C-SPAN, and I was involved in the programming, and he saw that I had stepped aside and wasn't in that role any longer, and called and said, we want to do it this year. And I hadn't paid attention before, but he said, there's a $100,000 personal check involved. Wow. I will tell you now, though, so you'll know, I will not take one penny of this. The exciting thing for me is I'm going to move it right on out to the society, including some of the kind of things that you're doing here, and that's a thrill. I don't have that much money, and it's and I just think you ought to know that. The other thing is that my colleagues at the office don't know I'm even here tonight, and I've done that for a reason, and that is, why should they have the burden of worrying whether I'm going to come back and say, you got to cover the Manhattan Institute's next event in New York? We just separate all this, and it's if I hadn't stepped down, I wouldn't be here, but I'm very honored, Larry, and it's not, I need this kind of thing, because where I live, nobody pays any attention to any of us. There's so many people in Washington, so you come out once in a while and somebody says nice things. I got on your website, and it fits in with what we're talking about tonight, because this country, and Mr. Goldsmith was right, there's something special about what we do in this country. And one of the first people to ever recognize that was Alexis de Tocqueville. And you have him quoted on the website. Well, I'm going to tell you a story that has nothing to do with the situations you've talked about. It's a silly story. But I've never been able to tell this before, so I'm going to tell it. Years ago, about 15 years ago, I had been interviewing people every Sunday night with books, and all the time Alexis de Tocqueville's name was popping up. And then when I was in school, I had a good education at Purdue University, but we never talked about Alexis de Tocqueville. I kept saying, who is this guy? Why are they all quoting him? So I got into it deeply, and so much so I said, why don't we go around the country where Alexis de Tocqueville went back in 1825-26 and do programs from the different cities. He went to 55 different cities. Well, my colleagues looked at me like I was completely nuts. If C-SPAN had ratings, we would have completely failed. But they agreed, and we did it. And we decided to go to France. And I found out one night in one of these events, some guy walks up out of the audience. He says, Tocqueville's got a chateau over there in France you might be interested in. I said, really? He said, yeah, I'm a Tocqueville scholar, and I've been over there. So I said, well, let's just go. So anyway, we formed this relationship with the Tocqueville family. The Count, there's a Count. His last name's Duraville. His son actually practices law right here in New York. And we went over there, and we had our group went over there and had a lunch, and the Count took us to lunch, and it was a pretty good deal. We went to a fancy French restaurant up in Tocqueville, France, which is up near Normandy. So after it was over, we went back to the chateau to take a tour, and this is a very silly story, but I was with 4 or 5 of my colleagues, and there was so much garlic. At the lunch, I popped a piece of gum in my mouth. Whew, it was unbelievable. So the Count had a dog, and the dog's name was Gotha. And we're walking around outside of this chateau, and I'm thinking, I better get rid of this gum, because this is not very dignified. So when I wasn't thinking, I just took the piece of gum out of my mouth. It was white gum, and I just threw it. And it landed right on the side of Gotha. And we're trying to be proper to the proper French, and I'm thinking, if that Count or his son, Alexei, believe it or not, Alexei Tocqueville, sees that gum, they're going to be very suspicious. So I went over, and I decided, I reached down when I thought the Count wasn't looking and grabbed the gum on the side of the dog. Well, of course, you know what happened is I pulled it away. There's a nice long string. Well, some of my colleagues see what I'm doing. There's no moral to this story except I'm standing there wadding this gum up, trying to figure it out and hoping the Count doesn't see me. Well, we went on to actually do a live program from the chateau. The Count never got that mad at me. Anyway, the story had no meaning at all. I've just never told it.
I think it is clear how fortunate we are to believe in the power of ideas.
Supply the common sense and the fresh thinking of the Manhattan Institute.